Alright everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the installment series about how to arrange for solo guitar. So where we left off, we were leaving off on the second system on the downbeat, right on the F minor 9. So if you look at this melody here, we have, this basically kind of is what's happening here. We have G, so that's the next kind of idea about our melody. So what we need to really think about is we need to lay out the chords. So we realize that we have an F minor 9 chord. And we need to figure out how we can get G in the top voice. Well, actually this voicing of an F minor 9 chord works really, really well. So we have that G right in the melody there. Now we need to figure out how we can get an A flat and a B flat. And then G again. Well, the cool thing is 1/2 step up from our G is our A flat. So all I'm doing here is sliding my 4th finger up to get that note. And what I'm doing there is I'm going to do a bar across those strings to get that B flat note. So from the previous measure we would have this, from the E flat. And now on that second measure we need to go back to the G again, all over an F minor 9 chord. This one has B flat in the bass if you wanted. You could bring your thumb over top of it, but I'm not too worried about that because the harmony is still an F minor 9 chord. So we would have... Now we're going to have an octave lower of this line. It's going to be here now. So what I need to figure out there is I have an E flat diminished 7 chord, fully diminished 7 chord. So this is a little bit tricky because the way that we have this harmony, here's our fully diminished chord. Well, that doesn't really lend ourselves very easily to get this melody note. So what I'm thinking about here is how I can rearrange my fingers to encompass some of those notes of that fully diminished 7 chord. So what I'm doing here is I'm just reconfiguring my fingers so I can get that top part. So here's it all in succession. And now we're going to start all over with the same exact sequence that we did in the beginning. So starting on the 3rd measure, from the pickup notes from the previous measure. Now we have a new kind of section here. We have a B7 altered chord. So I'm not so worried necessarily about the altered tone because we are over a B7 chord. So again, one of the biggest things you have to understand about solo arranging for the guitar is the fact that you're really only taking the most necessary notes because we are only dealing with one hand, unlike on a piano where you have 2 hands to kind of voice the different chords. So you're taking the most essential notes of each chord. So on this F minor 11, we'll have our B flat and then our regular C to E flat kind of idea, this motif. And then we're going to do this full B7 chord. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make it what we would consider a B6. Because I'm getting in the 6th scale degree tone here, which is our melody note. So B7, so this will have the 7th in it, but it'll also have the 6th in it. So really, if you wanted to consider this as what we would call a B13 chord. 6th and 13ths are interchangeable. Anyway, so from that we would have F minor 9. Now I'm going to lift my pinky up to get that F note, so... And then I'm going to have my pinky come over to get that E flat. So just think about this when you're arranging. It's always just kind of placing the chord down and then figuring out where your fingers can move around to get the melody note. So again, we have the B flat 7, or the B13 in this case. Now, this is a point in time where it's really hard to voice a chord based around this next melody part. So this is what we would have a G add 9. And no matter what way you kind of voice this, it's a little bit difficult to kind of get that melody note, because there's so many notes that are in the chord here. So this is an instance where I would kind of like not necessarily play a chord and just play the melody line. And I would maybe do something a little bit different to accent the melody or make it stand out a little bit more. So in this case, I'm doing a little harmonic. So we have a D to D octave. So I'm going from the 7th fret of the G string to the 10th fret of the high E. That's my octave. So from the previous measure, and that helps kind of sustain it out too, because that's supposed to ring for 6 beats essentially, from the half note tied to the whole note. So again, I would have this whole in progress. Let that ring out. So now we're actually in the bridge section here. So the reason I consider this a bridge is because it's kind of a little bit different than the main motif of the song, and we have some new different chord patterns here. So we need to think about, again, how we can figure out the harmonies and the melody notes that are around the harmony. So we're going to start with an A flat major 7. Most of the time you'll see an A flat major 7 like this, in this position, where you have root and then 7th and then 3rd and then 5th on top. So one thing that I consider about this is we have this melody note of E flat to F. Well, the way this chord is shaped, we don't really have a really good way to get this melody note on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reconfigure my fingers and figure out how I can get this melody note on top. Well, check this out. This is another way to play an A major or an A flat major 7 chord, or any major 7 chord for that case. You can, you know, move it in any single direction. But really what I'm doing is I'm doing a full bar at the 5th fret, or the 4th fret on all 6 strings. My second finger is going to come down to the 5th fret of the D string, and my third finger is going to come down to the 5th fret of the G string. And I'm really only targeting the 6, 4, 3, and 2 strings. And that's going to be those notes that are right out of that chord. We're just reconfiguring it differently, which leaves my pinky open, which leads me to be able to do the F to E flat line. And the E flat will be taken care of by the bar on the first finger. So from that previous measure, you would have this. And then you have this. And you have a new section. Now going forward, we have a G minor 7 to a C7 chord. Now, so we need to figure out how we can get the G minor 7 note with the D on top. Well, most of the time we think of G minor 7 like this, or like this. Well, we need to just figure out how we can get the D. This is my closest D in that chord. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the most important notes out of that, and I'm going to go root, minor 3rd, and 5th. So I'm not even worried about necessarily the 7th in this. I'm just worried about those notes. So what I'm doing here is going to be 3, and then nothing on the 2 strings there, and then 3 and 3 again. So you have root, minor 3rd, and 5th. And that'll get my D note in top. So from that previous part, and to get that B flat note next, all I have to do is jump over the next string. It's right there. So I'm on my G string 3rd fret. Now I need to figure out how I can get a C7 chord with a flat 9 with G in the melody part here. Most of the time you think of like a C with a flat 9 like this chord. So here would be a way that you could voice it. You just have to do like your C7 chord shape, flat the 9, so that it's a C sharp, reconfigure your fingers. And I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. That's kind of a hard... I mean, you could do it that way, but I'm going to show you a way that I really like doing it, and I'm going to use an inversion. And again, this is the practicality behind really knowing your triads and how to invert chords to play in order to get your melody notes. So if you look like at a basic C7 chord, you're going to have the notes of C, E, G, and B flat. So G is actually the 5th of a C dominant 7 chord. And we need to figure out how we can get the G tone in the highest melody note. So you could use this voicing. This would be completely fine. But again, I'm not really a big fan of that. I want to be able to move my chord around so I have a little bit of different timbre in the strings. So here's a voicing that I really like that has G. in the bass here, or in the melody line, which will be the 8th fret of your B string. And basically what it is it's going to be a C7 chord in first inversion. It's going to look like this. It's a bit of a finger stretcher. So I'm going to have second finger on the major third on the 7th fret of the A string. I'm going to have my third finger on the 8th fret of the D string. That'll be my flat 7, my B flat. My first finger is going to spread back to the 5th fret of the G string. That'll be my root. And then my 5th will be taken care of by my pinky. So check this out. Here is a C7 chord in first inversion. So from this whole measure, that takes with that care of that melody note. Now this lends ourselves really, really well into the next part. This is why I'm not really a big fan of this voicing, because I'm in this next position for this next part where I needed to get this B flat to C melody. So what I had to do there is I had to do another an F minor 9 chord. Now what I'm thinking about this is I'm actually playing this version of an F minor chord. This is an F minor 7 chord. You should also understand that in a lot of arranging music, there are all kinds of chords that have extensions. A lot of them can be interchanged. So if you see a minor 9, you can interchange it with a minor 11 or a minor 7th. A good rule of thumb is to keep that in mind so that when you are arranging for the guitar for solo music like this, you can really kind of lend this together so that you can make a lot of sense of it when you're arranging different pieces. So again, here we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing a full bar at the 6th fret. My second finger is going to grab the root, the 8th fret of the A string. That's going to be our F, and then we're going to grab the flatted 7th with our third finger on the 8th fret of the G string. And that bar is going to take care of the B flat. And we just have to move our pinky over to grab the C. So that'll be, and then we have to get that G. My pinky just grabs over and grabs the G note, 8th fret of the B string. Now this is what I really like about this too, is the next chord shape that we have is going to be an E flat major 9 or E flat major 7, depending on what way you want to voice it. Now a typical E flat major 9 would look like this. This would work really well actually, because we need to have the D in the melody note. However, I want to kind of break up the timbre of this and like do a higher register voicing. So check this out. I'm going to do this. So this is an E flat major 7 chord in root position with the 7th in the bass. So I'm climbing all the way up here to the 13th and I'm going 13, 12, 11, 10 on the top 4 string, little staircase shape. And that really kind of breaks up the timbre of the sound, and I'm getting that high melody note in there. So from that whole kind of bridge section, we'd have this. This inversion. And see how that lends itself to working really, really well? Super, super cool. Now let's just continue to chug right on along. When we look at the next measure here, we're going to have an A minor 7 flat 5 chord, which typically would look like this. Now this actually works really well because our melody note is this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do my A minor 7 flat 5, and I'm going to swap it out with an A minor 11 and just slide this up and forth like this to get this melody note. So an A minor 7 flat 5 and an A minor 11 really, really similar as far as their tones. They're just one tone off. The 5th, the flatted 5, and the 11th. So what I'm going to do here for that A minor 7 flat 5 is I'm going to just slide this up. Now my next chord change on that half bar change is a D7 chord. This works out really well because we need to have D octave notes, and in the D7 chord we have that. We have the octave here and here. So 5 and 3 on the A and D strings. So right over our regular D7 chord. So we have that. That works out perfectly. And you can roll the chord. Let me do that again. Now we need to do a G minor 11. Now this is another example of where the harmonies just work out really well with the melody line. Just a regular old G minor 7 or G minor 11 chord, like this. What we've done so far. So 3, 3, 3, and then 1, and then sliding it up to a D note. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this whole part. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have a C13 chord. So there's a couple different ways that we can think about playing this. We can think about playing it all the way up in this position here. Now this is going to be a little bit challenging because we need to get a C to a D note. So we need to think about how we can kind of possibly get that. And that's going to be hard because there would be the 9th on top. I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep a regular old C7 chord and I'm going to just suss it out with my pinky to get the 9th. So think about taking the most basic chords that you know and then applying them in this and just manipulating the chords in a fashion where you can get the melody notes to ring out. So here we go. Now we need to go, we need to have an F9 again. So the thing is we need to get the C note and a C octave note. So we could go, so we need to think about how we can get that. Well, we're already down in this position from the C13, C7th chord. So what I'm thinking about that is I'm just going to substitute that out for a regular F7 chord. If I want to get the 9th in there, I can, but the melody note is C, so we want to make sure that's the top note. So I'm just doing an F7 chord and then doing that for the octave. So let me take it up to the entire point there from the A flat major 7. Then we have our inversion. Then we need to do our F minor 9. Right? And then we need to do our A flat minor 7 flat 5. So that's up into that point right there. Alright, Hatt Clan fam, that was the video. I hope you really liked it. Let me know what other technique videos that you'd like to see. And if this is the first time you've come across my channel, definitely consider subscribing and checking out all the other content on the channel as well. And if you know somebody that would really benefit from a lesson like this, feel free to send it their way. I'm really trying to build up the channel and continue to grow and help other people reach their musical goals and their musical journey. Alright, enough of that said. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.